Hey, kitchen stewardship folks. It's Katie Kimball here today, scheduled for noon, and it's 12:08 because, of course, technology always throws a curveball, and this time it's thrown, I don't know, three or four at me. I've never actually gotten on Facebook Live this way, inviting a guest in, and I'm super excited to have this guest. I'm going to tell you about her in a second, but I have to start with that apology that I had no idea what I was doing, but I think it's working so far. Our guest today is Dr. Emilia Javorsky. She's a Harvard grad, and she is a dermatology specialist. Let me get down to her bio here a little bit, and I think we are getting technology to work for us instead of against us. Welcome, Dr. Javorsky.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, and we even have video and audio, so like total score on that one. Let me just talk a little bit about you so that the Kitchen Stewardship audience knows who you are. KS fans, of course, we talk a lot in the summer months about skin and skin protection. We talk all year round about keeping our skin safe, keeping our family safe, and keeping our environment safe. And it's a really tough battle with all the products out there throwing chemicals at us through our air, through our water, and through what we kind of want to put on our skin, whether it's makeup, sunscreen, lotions, soaps, shampoo, whatever. It can be kind of difficult to find the green options. So, as you know, our family's tested almost over now 100 natural mineral sunscreens, which has been a crazy journey in the last 8 or 9 years. I'll be updating that post at kitchenstewardship.com/sunscreens soon. We've got a few last new ones we're testing over spring break. But I'm excited to talk more about our skin and about sun protection with Dr. Emilia Javorsky today. She is a doctor by training and research dermatology at Harvard. Her research revealed the shortcomings of sunscreen. I love this. I cannot wait to talk about this. So she has a passion for creating effective, non-toxic solutions that also protect our skin from UV radiation and the pitfalls there with skin cancer. She's launching a new product called Sun Dots, which I think kind of understand, but I'll get there by the end of this, and so will all of you. So welcome so much, Dr. Javorsky. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk about sun protection today.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be really good. So I'm super excited about this. Can you tell the Kitchen Stewardship audience a little bit more in detail about your background in medicine and health to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So actually, before I went to med school, I had a background in public health. So I come at medicine from a public health perspective. So I spent a couple of years doing research in public health and got a master's in public health. So I was really always interested in sort of at a population level, what's coming at our bodies from an environmental perspective, from a healthcare access perspective. And so always kind of had a passion for sun protection because it's a huge public health problem. Mm-hmm. And then it was when I went to med school that I really developed a passion for dermatology and started doing research at Harvard Medical School in the derm department. And up until that point, I really had known sun protection was an important thing, but I didn't really know why. I know that I'm supposed to do this and, will help me prevent skin cancer. But then I always thought, I'm someone of a fairly tan skin type. Skin cancer doesn't run in my family. Is this something I should really be worried about? And it wasn't until really getting to know what the harmful effects of sun are on our skin and what a toll it takes on our skin health that I realized this isn't just about preventing skin cancer, even though that's a huge portion of it. This is really about, our skin health over our lifetime. And so that's really when I developed kind of a passion for sun protection.
This is going to be so great. So you're MD, you're not a practicing dermatologist.
Nope.
What is more of your medical practice experience?
Yes. So after med school, I decided that I was really interested in going into research and helping to kind of develop new products and tools to help people. And also really passionate about the consumer angle of kind of bringing products directly to people to help take control of their health. And so given that and my passion for sun protection and learning about kind of the shortcomings of many of the solutions out there, and then also a lot of the misinformation that's out there on sun protection was something that really said to me, this is a problem that I really want to work on.
Okay, very cool. I'm so excited. So let's start with the skin. You said sun protection is not all about preventing skin cancer, but about our general skin health. So give us a little science geek introduction for the audience here. What's the job of our skin, and then how does it protect us?
Yeah, so the job of our skin, we kind of joke that dermatology is the skin and everything in it, because it really is kind of how our body interacts with the outside world.
Okay.
And so it serves so many important functions, from an immune function of protecting us against germs and other things that are out there. It helps us cool off, it helps us stay warm, and is really just kind of also can be a surrogate of our overall health, because it's one of the organs that we can actually see and access. So it serves as like a pretty good metric of, many things that are going on the inside can also, show up on the skin in different ways and provide clues about our health. So our skin's both our protective function, and then also its function in giving us clues about our health is kind of, how I like to think about it.
Okay, yeah, it's amazing. I was just at a talk literally this week here in town in West Michigan about the gut-skin axis and how our skin can be the canary in the coal mine for a lot of stuff going on inside. So I am so all about this week, and just really, just learning a lot. And do you agree that in our world, you said you have a public health background, are we seeing an increase, like is the graph going up, of skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis and even acne, just things, rosacea, stuff that are like that canary in the coal mine? Is that a public health increase?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing increases in skin cancer. That's one that's really well documented. That's just kind of been on the rise, and especially with upticks in kind of the past 20, 30 years. But then there's also like many other like skin conditions are becoming increasingly common. Eczema is a great one that you mentioned. There is some like question of like, are we just more aware of it now than we were before? But and that like people are more savvy and there's more information out there, so people like feel empowered to go to a doctor and say, hey, this is something that's going on with my skin. But there's definitely, eczema is something that tracks very commonly with like allergies and asthma. They kind of sometimes can go together, and that sort of triad, so to speak, is definitely something else that's we know is on the rise, and we think that's not just an awareness problem, but actually a real thing that's happening.
Sure, sure. I mean, especially something like eczema. I mean, it's so obvious your baby's in pain. Like, this is not something that is just more diagnosed, right? Like an internal thing that we couldn't see 50, 100 years ago. Are there theories about why that's going up, or is it more just like, man, we need to research this more?
Yeah, so it's also hard because there's so many like confounding environmental factors that have happened over like the past 50 years, really, of like all of these new chemicals being introduced in our lives, are also being like super focused on hygiene and like disinfecting everything to kind of the max. So it's hard to say exactly what is causing it, but it's something like eczema is something that's much more common in places like the US and Europe than other like developing parts of the world. So there's definitely a correlation there with something that's been going on in our society, but teasing out exactly what that is hard.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, our bodies are so complex and our environment is so multifaceted that we can see the statistic, we can see that there's an issue. That's interesting. It's mostly in the developing world, so we can see it's probably us. It's probably something we're doing, but more research needed. That's such a tough one.
And that's also where my kind of passion for sort of natural and non-toxic products comes from, is kind of because we don't know really what the source is. So figuring out how we can incorporate as many of those into our lives as possible, to like, we don't know what it is, but trying to, make sure we're using as clean of products in our lives and our bodies is like the best way I can kind of see to help deal with that while we're still figuring out what's going on.
Yeah, oh man, that's my philosophy exactly. Like, sure, you can't prove or you haven't proven that XYZ chemical is bad for me, but I would rather be safe, better safe than sorry. I'd rather dial this back a little bit and not just jump into the unknown with my whole family's whole bodies, right?
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about the sun a little bit, science geek style. What does the sun do to our skin that's so damaging? And a little bit on the flip side too, I mean, we know we get some benefits from the sun, right? I mean, there's seasonal affective disorder when we don't get enough sun. We know we need vitamin D. So, like, I would love it if you could kind of talk advantage, disadvantage, and how we deal with that balance.
Sure, yeah. So it's interesting because two of the things that are talked about a lot in sun in terms of the bad outcomes are skin cancer, and then also people talk about aging. So it's thought that 80 to 90% of actually preventable aging is
My crow's feet. Yes, I know what those are.
but no, totally. And like the single best like anti-aging intervention that you can do is protect yourself from the sun. But I think very often these are talked about as like different things, like, oh, there's a skin cancer component and then there's an aging component. But really what they are is they're effects of the same kind of damage that's happening to your skin.
Okay.
You can kind of come at it from different angles, but the central thing that's happening is, to kind of geek out on you with what's happening with the sun and why it's causing this, is the UV rays. And so there's several types, but the ones we think about a lot are UVA light, which is thought of as kind of the aging light with a minor role in skin cancer, and UVB light, which is kind of thought as the major driver of skin cancer with a minor role in aging.
Okay.
And now there's even some thought that like even in what we call visible light, so light that's slightly outside of that UV spectrum, may also play a role in aging the skin. And sort of how it does it is that when the sunlight hits the skin, it basically generates what we call free radicals, which is something that you may have kind of heard about that cause something called oxidative damage to the cells. So really what it does is that all of that energy from the sun hitting your skin basically causes it to start some crazy chemistry that ends up harming kind of your cell's DNA, which is kind of its core program of what it's supposed to do. And then all of kind of the helper molecules in the skin. So the proteins and sort of structural components of the skin as well. And so I would say kind of the bad side. And then there's kind of like, what are the benefits of sun, right? And exactly what you talked on, like their seasonal affective disorder is a huge problem, especially for us living here in North America. And then there's the problem of vitamin D deficiency. And, we're surprisingly mostly vitamin D deficient when you live in the Northern Hemisphere, because you're just not getting that light all year round. But there's definitely a balance here between these two things. So sunlight hitting your skin is actually one of the best ways to generate vitamin D, which is a really, really important vitamin for our overall health. So I like to think of it as, they say, to get the vitamin D that you need, it's about 15 to 20 minutes of sun exposure that you get during the day.
Yep, and a little bit more for darker skin, right? A little bit less for our red-haired Irish people.
Yes, exactly. Yep, absolutely. And so, there's a mix here between, making sure we get a little bit of sun to make sure we get those benefits, mainly the vitamin D one, but not so much that we end up damaging our skin.
I tend to, that's what I try to do basically. Like, okay, kids, like go play for 15, 20 minutes. Like, all right, sunscreen time. Is that a viable effort to balance the advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah. So the thing about it is, even when we apply sunscreen, we very rarely actually apply it correctly.
Right.
And then there's like questions, there's a lot of questions around sunscreen, making sure like that the SPF that's claimed in that product is actually in that product. Making sure that we're applying enough, making sure that we're reapplying. And so even if we're using sunscreen and using other sun protection tools, odds are we're still not perfectly protected, and we're still getting that kind of light that you need to generate your vitamin D. Okay. Yeah, so I kind of recommend to people to be, pretty prudent about sun protection with the knowledge that like we're not perfect at it. And like that little bit of imperfection that we have can help us get the nutrients actually that we need.
Interesting. So especially like at a full day at the beach or at a park, an amusement park or whatever, put the sunscreen on right away, because you're going to get what seeps kind of through that will be your 15 minutes of vitamin D.
Totally. Yep. And then there's also, other potential sources of vitamin D out there. So whether they be foods that are fortified, or supplements. But then again, with supplements, you really have to do your homework to make sure you're getting, a good quality supplement for vitamin D.
Right. And people should test their vitamin D levels, right, to make sure that they're not going too high.
Exactly.
With a supplement.
Yeah. So vitamin D is one of kind of the vitamins that can accumulate in your system over time. So it's not like, oh, I just took it in and out. Over time, if you're taking huge doses of vitamin D, it can add up, and there's problems with having too much as well.
Right. Then you get vitamin D toxicity and you're like, oh, I just took all those expensive supplements and I went the wrong direction. Yeah, that's so tricky. So definitely testing is important with supplementing for vitamin D. Totally. Now you mentioned fortified foods. I feel like from what I've read, the fortified foods really aren't assimilated that well because it's not the right form of D. Do you have any background on that?
Yeah. So I don't have a ton of background on that, but from what I know about the vitamin D fortification is it gives you some benefit, but you don't want to kind of falsely rely on the like, oh, I'm having vitamin D fortified milk, therefore I'm set and getting adequate amounts of vitamin D. The best evidence is that certain supplements, so certain forms of vitamin D are better absorbed, and then the one that your skin generates from the sun are kind of the ones that are the gold standard.
The best of all. Yeah. D3 would be something to look for. We've got a question from Amy in the chat, which is a good one. And because this is a little controversial, I know people hit different places. What is an appropriate vitamin D number to look for on a blood test?
Yeah. So, I'm actually not sure what the current limits are. I know what kind of the recommended daily values are for vitamin D. So those, and then again, what those values are also really depends on what professional organization you're looking at. There's a lot of variability that thinks about what is the ideal vitamin D level to have in the blood, and also what is the ideal intake. So there are some, organizations that recommend as low as 600 international units a day. And then there's some that are up in the sort of 1,000 to 1,500 range. So,
and I've heard 2,000 to 4,000 as well. So
some are really high. And so again, it's just shows you how much research still needs to be done to know like what is the ideal place for us to be on that spectrum to kind of maximize our health.
Yeah, we really don't know what we don't know. And this would be a good time, by the way, to say that none of what we're talking about is intended to heal, cure, or treat any disease. This is just information, education. We're all science geeks here, and we all happen to be walking around in bodies and are trying to do our best to figure it out. But that's a very important disclaimer to say. And I'll share what I've learned over the past. Our family doctors tend to say between 30 and 50, and I forget the measurement, but when you do a blood test for vitamin D, they say between 30 and 50. Below 30 is deficient, which is what my husband was at for years and years until we figured out how to supplement well. But functional medicine docs will say, it's better to have between 40 and 70. They want it a little bit higher. It's kind of like non-disease versus good health is the way a functional medicine doc would describe that difference. And then what's the other thing I was just going to say? Oh, I don't remember. Oh, well, but anyway, so vitamin D, it is tricky because of course we don't want to reach vitamin D toxicity. You can get expensive blood tests through your doctor, may or may not be covered by insurance. But if your insurance doesn't cover a blood test, or if they just cover one a year and you're saying, well, if I'm going to supplement, I need to follow up with another test in 3 to 6 months to make sure I'm doing this correctly. ZRT Labs actually has an at-home spot blood test. You kind of prick your own finger and poke it on a paper, and that is much less expensive if your insurance isn't covering. So tip for the day on that one. Oh, this is another good question. Well, before we leave the subject of D, Penny asks, what are the side effects of low vitamin D?
Yeah, so there's many of them. Some fatigue is often one that people notice. There's also questions about like your bone health. So vitamin D is really important for sort of, you hear a lot about like calcium in your bones, and vitamin D is kind of crucial to making sure that that process happens and in terms of kind of bone strength. There's also questions, you can notice changes in your skin and your hair. So if you notice that you're getting some hair loss, very often vitamin D is one of the sort of things that will be tested for. And then there's kind of a spectrum of research that's out there of the role of vitamin D deficiency in a lot of diseases. So whether it be what is its role in, all the way up to some things like cancers or immune diseases. And so these are really active areas of research where, we're trying to figure out, there seems to be a correlation here. Is this causation? What's going on? But it's very clear in how sort of wide the spectrum is of the research that there's a lot of different disorders that vitamin D may play a role in.
Yes, I agree. It's thought to be really important. And what's amazing is how many symbiotic relationships there are in our nutrients. So you just mentioned vitamin D is really important for our bodies to basically utilize calcium best. And I have a whole post on other things you need to have in balance so your body can use vitamin D best. Like you could be popping 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day, but if your K2, your magnesium, and your zinc are totally low, your body is probably not going to be able to utilize that D. So it's like, it totally feels overwhelming. You're just like, fine, if I can't do it all right, I won't do it at all. But like, let's just, baby steps. We got to just learn what we can and do what we can. At the very least, we know that some sunshine is good for us. Sunshine also has its issues, of course. So, Dr. Javorsky, you mentioned the free radicals, which I always think of as like swiper, no swiping, that Dora Fox, like the free radical is missing an electron, and it's like this mean little beast trying to steal an electron from your cells, which of course your cells would like to be stable and keep. So that's kind of the image for us to think about when we think about free radicals. And then antioxidants are like the superhero coming in and saying, here, free radical, have an electron not from this person's body. Is that a decently accurate little kid description?
I really, really like that description. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's really great. Is there kind of in your body reacting with anything they can get their hands on, and antioxidants play a key role of being like, chill, I have one for you.
Awesome. So where does sunscreen come in? What role does sunscreen play in protecting us from these free radicals?
Yeah, so sunscreen is really kind of the mainstay of sun protection. And when I talk about sunscreens, I'm a big believer, as you are, in mineral sunscreens. And so, so kind of how those work is they're basically helping your skin not get as much sunlight in.
So the free radicals don't even happen. This is our wall before.
Yeah, they're kind of like a little shield that you're putting over your skin, so that bad light doesn't get into it and start doing all of this chemistry. And so that's really why sunscreen is kind of the mainstay there, is it's kind of preventing this damage from happening in the first place. And so there are other kind of, things that we can talk about that boost that antioxidant response to be able to deal with the damage that happens to it. But that's why sunscreen is really of vital importance, because it's making sure that damage isn't kind of happening in the first place.
Okay, which is really cool. Now, mineral sunscreen versus conventional creams, everything I've ever researched, which is a ridiculous amount, they do work differently. They do that job of stopping the sun from actually making free radicals differently. Can you do a quick explanation of that for us?
Sure. Of like the mineral versus chemical sunscreen? Yes. Totally.
I always call it conventional because technically everything has chemical makeup. So my audience is very well educated, and they're like, no, that's not appropriate.
No,
Yeah.
no, I really, really appreciate that. We feel similarly about the word natural. There are a lot of things that are natural. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're good.
They're safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
But so chemical sunscreens work slightly differently. So what they do is they absorb the light. So if you think of the mineral sunscreens as a shield on your skin that's just reflecting the light away, chemical sunscreens that are on your skin are molecules that are basically built to react with the sunlight. So instead of all of that reactive chemistry happening inside of your skin, it's happening sort of with these molecules that you're putting on your skin. So there's like still chemical reactions happening. It's just not in the deeper layers of your skin. It's happening on the surface where you put the sunscreen.
Okay. And then, I mean, the conventional sunscreen always says apply 20 minutes before. I had another expert say that that's because it does need to kind of seep into the skin in order to, you know, have appropriately safe reactions, or not safe, but effective reactions. So is that where we kind of want to stay away from conventional sunscreen because it's still a chemical reaction under our skin? And are there byproducts from that that could be harmful?
Totally. So like anytime there's this like reactive chemistry happening, you know, there's like a question of comfort, like what the data is on that is unclear, but the fact that there is this kind of chemistry happening, and there have been some studies that have been done that have even shown like when you put conventional sunscreens on your skin just by themselves, they can produce some chemistry happening in your skin.
Without the sun.
Without the sun.
Oh.
Just in and of themselves. Yeah, there's kind of like emerging data around that. There's also questions about, you know, what are kind of the safety profiles behind the ingredients that are being used in these conventional sunscreens. You know, there's been some studies out there that shown they've been in a family of things called potentially endocrine disruptors. And so there's like, you know, outstanding questions about safety that aren't there with the mineral sunscreens. And then there's also questions about like us being conscientious about the environment. It's pretty well established that conventional sunscreens are pretty detrimental to marine life, especially coral reefs.
Yes, I understand oxybenzone is a chemical which is widely used in conventional sunscreen, completely banned in Hawaii in the last year and a half.
Yeah, exactly. So they actually in Hawaii, there was a huge kind of policy effort to get this particular molecule banned because of how bad of a toll it was taking on kind of the marine life around the islands, because it seeps off your skin into the water. It has these really bad...
like tens of thousands of tons per year go in the ocean off of our bodies. It's crazy.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, and as far from what I understand too, oxybenzone, the chemical that is first banned in Hawaii, I'm sure more will follow, but that's also one of the biggest endocrine disruptors and estrogen mimickers for our bodies.
Yes, absolutely. And if you look, a great database that I like when kind of evaluating products is the EWG database, Environmental Working Groups database. And if you look at kind of like how these are rated, chemical sunscreens are pretty up there with questions of toxicity. And so, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer to stay away from them. But as you mentioned already, Dr. Javorsky, sunscreen doesn't always work perfectly, right? We apply it, we never apply enough. It's supposed to be a shot glass per person. Like you'd use literally a bottle per person in your family for a beach trip for one day. Can you, I mean, I can't even imagine going to like Mexico. You'd have to have like 20 bottles of sunscreen in your luggage. Like, not that we shouldn't do things that are hard just because they're right, or that are right just because they're hard, but still, like no one does that. You know, we wash it off, we forget to reapply. Sometimes we don't think we'll be out in the sun very long, so we might not even apply. Like, oh, I'm just gonna be out for 20 minutes, right? Then we don't apply, and obviously some bad things happen. So are there other ways that we can help our skin recover? Not other ways, but ways we can help our skin recover when we do get burned, as far as like the skin cancer and the aging, like combating some of those free radicals?
Yeah, so there's kind of lots of things that I think can be helpful for that. So I would say kind of one extra point I throw in there about sunscreen is there's many products out there that are listed to have SPF in them. So especially thinking for like women, many like facial moisturizers or makeups or powders. And so sometimes those can impart like a false sense of security a little bit, because exactly as you were talking about, it takes a lot of sunscreen to get that SPF in the bottle. And so like the way you would use a moisturizer or use a makeup, you know, you're really not getting that, you know, SPF that you think you're getting on the bottle. But in terms of, you know, what happens when you get burned, you know, someday you tried your best and you were just out there too long and you come home and realize like, oh no, you know, you have that like sun regret. No, there's plenty you can do. I mean, the first is to keep your skin cool and moist, especially if you have a burn. People like using aloe vera a lot as kind of a soothing agent on something that's a burn. If it's a burn that's so bad that you're kind of starting to blister, like leave the blisters alone is a general way of saying it. You don't want to start picking at your skin or sort of looking at the manipulating the damaged areas. Definitely, if it's a bad burn, you should go to your doctor. I think like blistering sunburns, that's like a sign that you should probably see your physician. You should also stay hydrated. That's important because can dehydrate your skin when you get to that point. And then also just kind of taking it as a, you know, not beating yourself up about it, but taking it as a lesson kind of moving forward, just as a reminder, you know, about what happens when you're out there too long. So just trying to be cognizant of it going forward.
But once you have that burn, there's no like somewhat reversal on the damage that's happened, like it's kind of in the past, or?
Yeah, so in terms of like sun exposure, we think of it, people tend to think of like sun damage as those days at the beach where I stayed out there too long and got burned going forward. And that actually really is only part of your sun risk. The most of your sun risk for your health comes over the course of your lifetime. So it's doing those things that we do every day when you're going for a run or you're walking your dog. You're actually getting way more sun than, you know, just those couple of days at, you know, the beach during the year. And so that's why I really see kind of sun protection as a way to, as something that should be part of your everyday kind of consideration, that it's not just a summer thing, because your skin is really resilient at kind of repairing itself and restoring itself. It's really remarkable in that way. So, you know, your skin can recover from a bad day at the beach, but it's really that day after day after day exposure over the course of your lifetime that kind of wears it down and causes permanent damage.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective, because I read statistics like 5 sunburns doubles your risk of melanoma. And I said to my husband, I literally looked up from a book I was reading, I was like, who has not had at least 5 times in their life, you know, by age 20 probably, but, you know, like every person in our family gets at least a little burn, a little like, oops, the cheeks got a little red once a year. So like my 5-year-old's probably had 5 burns. I'm like, 5 burns doubles your risk. Like, where are their controls? Who didn't have 5 burns? Like 3 people in the world? I don't know. So I read stats like that, and like, we're just going to have to stress out about it, you know? But so it's good and bad in some ways mentally to hear that actually it's just as important to think about your skin every day. It's good because we feel more empowered. We can do something about it every single day of our life. And then it's a little bad, like, oh my gosh, we have to do something about it every single day of our life.
Totally. No, totally. And those kinds of statistics too, I think they're really important for people to be aware of, but I think it's equally as important to know that it's kind of an ongoing process, because, you know, some things I've heard sometimes are people say, well, you know, if it's just those sunburns that I got when I was a kid, why would I bother with sun protection as an adult, you know? And so really kind
of already damaged to skin cancer because of 20 years ago. Yeah.
Exactly. Like there's risk that comes from there, but then risk keeps building over the course of your life. And so it's never kind of too early or late to intervene.
That's good. So we can think of it as a balance scale. We've got our damage on this side and all the good things we can do to either protect moving forward for tomorrow or just, consume antioxidants and, treat our skin well and be hydrated. Amy in the chat asks, should I put sunblock on my exposed skin every time I'm going walking around outside? And I have the same question because we just went for a 15-minute walk. I mean, it's 30 degrees here. I certainly did not think about sunscreen.
Yeah, so I always recommend putting on sunscreen when you go out. And it's something we think of as kind of, only something for sunny days when I'm out there for a long time, but there's still UV light coming in days when it's kind of cloudy. Or, another big one is if you do a lot of winter sports, there's a lot of light reflecting off of snow. You can realize like you're out for a day and you went skiing and you come home and you're burned and you're like, I thought that was a beach thing, not a snow thing. But so I recommend that people wear sunscreen every day with kind of the knowledge that, you're getting some protection and being outside, you're still probably going to get the light that you need as well from kind of the health perspective.
Interesting. And I do have a link for a daily facial moisturizer.
Yeah, that's great.
So I'll put that in the post. And that one's tricky for me because personally I feel like, but we do need, if I'm only out for 15 minutes and I need 15 minutes of sun, I really can't do like that percentage-based game. Yeah. So that's tricky. Of course, you're the doctor, I'm not, but everyone kind of has to make their own call on that one. What
and it's I also like take a pragmatic approach to it as well, because very often when you talk about like everyday protection, you're saying that with the knowledge that people probably aren't going to do it every single day because life is busy and hard and like you have a lot of things to remember. So sometimes we kind of really emphasize that message. So you remember as much as you can, but we're also practical and know like there's so many things we need to be balancing with our health and also balancing with like our responsibilities every day that like, we shouldn't feel guilty about missing a day and kind of like a do the best we can kind of approach.
Sure thing. I'd love to hear your perspective on suntan. Like I literally just heard two different experts this week. One in the book said, all suntans are skin damage. And I've heard that before. And then another expert said, well, slowly increasing your exposure to the sun over the course of, say, a summer for us in Michigan, and building that tan actually can protect because the higher melanin in your skin reduces the skin damage like the next day. So where do you fall on a suntan? Good, bad, both?
Yeah, so suntan, I'm kind of in the camp where I do think that most suntan is reflective of skin damage having happened to your skin. But I totally acknowledge that, yes, it's true. The more melanin you have in your skin, the more your skin is protected. So the kind of way that I view that is, again, just doing the best you can with other sort of sun protection, techniques. So if you have sort of sun coming to your skin and it's causing you to tan and it provides you a little bit of protection, that's still going to pale in comparison to the protection that you get from putting on a mineral sunscreen on your skin. So I tend to fall on the line of putting mineral sunscreen on versus
Okay, but yet it is. So it is kind of both. It is protection and damage. So now we're just looking at that balance scale again. If you've got that damage, it's like also on this side protecting you a little bit, but then you need to add some more on this side to heal your skin from the damage. So it's a little bit mind-boggling. Yeah.
Really interesting areas of research happening right now, looking to see like what are different approaches that we could take, whether they be new drugs or whether they be things that are already out there, to tan skin without sun, because there is knowledge that, if we all had more melanin, we would be better protected against the sun. So there's definitely in some derm departments research programs going on to see like, is there a safe sunless way to tan skin to get that protection without the sun damage?
Oh my goodness. Well, you are providing a new product called Sun Dots, which is like a completely different layer of protection. It's not physical on the outside, it's on the inside, and it's kind of fascinating. I'd love to hear how it helps bolster sun protection from the inside out. How does Sun Dots work?
Yeah, so Sundots is built, the active kind of ingredient in it is called Polypodium leucotomus, which is like a long, fancy, scary word. It's a fern that's kind of endemic to Central and South America. And I came across this when I was actually a researcher in the Harvard Derm department, because years earlier they had done studies on this fern extract in the department and shown that it helped to basically protect the skin against both the effects of UVA and UVB light. And that really piqued my interest because I was like, this is a very different approach to sun protection than I'd heard about before. And I was like, I'm not so convinced, right? Like, I'm not sure I can take a fern extract and help get protection against sun. But I really kind of started digging through the literature and saw that there were many human studies that have been done both on the sort of efficacy of this for what we call photoprotective benefits, and then also safety studies that had been done. And this particular extract had been used for a very long time in Europe, actually in Spain. Okay. Is a country where it's been used for about 30 years for this purpose. And so that really got me interested into thinking, well, what's really happening here and why isn't this tool in broader use? And so I started talking to colleagues in the derm community, and they were like, oh yes, Polypodium leucotomus, that's like a great thing for sun protection. I use it as kind of part of my regimen. And so after that, I was like, I got to start using this Polypodium leucotomus too. And I have been kind of since that time. And I just really think that it's a fascinating sort of extra tool in the toolkit. And in terms of how it works, it's a compound, the extract from the fern is very rich in antioxidants. So kind of what we were talking about before, that can come in and help to deal with the damage. So it's not really working from protecting the sunlight from getting to your skin. It's kind of coming from the other side of helping your skin deal with the damage as the sun comes at it. And it's thought primarily through this sort of constellation of antioxidants that are in this particular fern extract. So it's something I've been using for a long time. And then it was when I met my co-founder, Chris, who it was both a new parent who was really passionate about sort of safe, non-toxic products, and also had a background in consumer health. So really knew how to bring quality healthcare products to consumers, that we said, this is a really important tool in the toolkit. Like, we have sunscreens and we have hats and clothes and things. Like, wouldn't it be great to have something else? Because we know, like, both of those work, but they're not perfect and they have their shortcomings. And so that was kind of what inspired us to create Sundots, to kind of add another dimension to the sun protection toolkit.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you made them into a gummy, so they are friendly for all ages. I'm assuming, I actually didn't double check, but no artificial colors.
No artificial colors, made with organic ingredients, and they're also vegan.
Okay, very cool. So, I mean, supplements are awesome.
Yeah.
Are there actual foods, like, I'm not going to cook the fern probably, but are there actual foods we can eat that would also have, like, maybe not as potent of an effect, but along those lines of getting that balance scale up on the healthy side?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of research that's been done into potential foods that could help exactly through a lot of these similar mechanisms of kind of boosting your skin health from the inside to be able to deal with the damage that comes to it. The area where I think has been the strongest in terms of clinical studies has been looking at the effects of lycopene, which is very common in like tomato paste products. that have shown that that may have some photoprotective effects. There's also been, other studies that have looked at the variety of foods that are rich in antioxidants. So whether they be things like green tea or things that are rich in what we call carotenes, like carrots is great.
Sweet potatoes, probably, yeah.
Exactly, yep, anything kind of orange. Anything that's kind of broccoli extract has been another one that's been looked at. But all of these studies have very often looked at like the extracts of this, or like green tea extract or broccoli extract or spinach extract, pomegranate extract. So those are obviously a lot more potent than the actual foods.
Right, because no one's paying for studies about food. They need to figure out how to package and sell it.
But at the same time, there's like pretty good evidence, like all of these kinds of foods are essential to like a really healthy diet and have been shown really healthy for you. So I really see it as like, we might not have solid evidence out there from like a research standpoint, but we know these things are good for us and our health. And like, this is just, another way in which they may be good for our health as well. So I'm like a big sort of recommender that these are things that should be in everyone's diet.
Yes, I love that too. Like no one is saying don't eat your vegetables. No one has ever said eat fewer vegetables. So this is saying that, research is showing antioxidants are good for all of you, really, but they're really good for your skin. They're really good, like anti-cancer, skin cancer, anti-any cancer. So the brighter, bolder colors of vegetables you can eat, the more colors you can get in throughout your week, and the more quantity of vegetables you can eat, the better you are at balancing that scale of whether it's skin or disease in general. Like, just eat more vegetables, which is, easy to say, sometimes hard to do.
Yep. Yes, no, absolutely. It can be hard to do. It can also be expensive to do sometimes. But it's really, has been shown to be something that really is great for your health. So I think investing in our health is important. So.
And then I think of sun dots. I think of it as like almost an insurance. Like, I'm not going to leave my sunscreen at home and go to the beach because I took my sun dots for the last week or whatever. But it's just kind of like a backup plan, right? Because the sunscreen is either sometimes forgotten or not reapplied or imperfect application. It's like this, it's the backup where, sunscreen would block the sun, some gets through, and we've got like our infantry coming up in the rear, and that's the sun dots. So I think that's really awesome. Sun dots right now are on Indiegogo, so you can get perks and benefits of lots more sun dots than you would get like once they're actually on the market for the same price. So definitely check those out. I've got the link above. I think it's above the video. But we'll get this on YouTube too, and then it will be below the video. So we'll make sure that we keep connected with sun dots. Do you have any kind of final words as far as like what we should do for our sun protection repertoire, the sunscreen, sun dots, eat lots of vegetables, anything else?
Exactly, kind of is as you said, like we are really passionate about like taking a holistic kind of all of the above approach to sun protection, because we know, as we said before, like life is busy, there's a lot of things to do. So like the more things you can remember and like the more tools you have at your disposal, like the more likely you are to remember. So like sunscreen is the, I think, single most important one, having a good mineral sunscreen. But then these other things, exactly as we're talking about, like sun dots is providing kind of a background foundation, wearing a hat, wearing, a t-shirt, and seeking shade when it's like, as we're going into these summer months and you're in the height of the day, like sit under a tree.
Too, yeah.
Yeah. So like all of those things are kind of what can help us decrease our overall risk. And so just like remembering that we have all these tools at our disposal to like use the best we can.
Yep. And not stress out about perfection, right? I like that you said, don't stress out about a little burn. Like, it's not the end of the world. And I think the pendulum in general in society is swinging back, where every year I see more and more percentage of little boys at the beach with the shirts on. and little girls with like sleeves instead of completely open shoulders. And I'm grateful for that. Now, unfortunately, of course, I still see lots of people spraying the nasty sprays and, running around without their shirt, but it's moving in the right direction. And so, for me, I'm grateful for that. Amy just asked, are sunblock clothes good then? And I think you and I would both agree that they're a great idea, especially for prolonged sun exposure.
Yeah. And I would say that there's, both, clothes that you already have are great. And if you're like going out there to buy clothes specifically for like, hey, I want a great shirt for my son at the beach. There also is a system that's similar to SPF. It's called UPF. So it's a way of kind of rating clothing with how strong the fabric is at screening out the sunlight. So that's also definitely a great thing to look for if you're looking for like a specific hat or a shirt to kind of protect you for those beach days.
Right. Yeah. I just read that like a white cotton t-shirt really only protects from about 5% of the rays of the sun when it's wet. And so that cracks me up because I see a lot of men, they start to get burned and they're like, oh no, I'm going to throw a t-shirt on so I don't get burned. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so it's like barely helping, which is really interesting because we think, it's a shirt, but the sun is still getting through those fibers, which is kind of another good example too of how we're still getting some vitamin D and some sun exposure even with sunblock and that's much less visible than an actual full t-shirt. But yeah, and the color of the shirt, the tightness of the weave, the fabric, and whether it's wet or not all impacts that UPF factor, which is really interesting. Kind of just to close out, Dr. Javorsky, I would love to hear your kind of summary, a little bit of sun dots and how they work and what your Indiegogo project is doing. And then a little last question from me. And I guess I'm so curious if people in South America consumed this fern or if it's been used in any way, like traditionally as a poultice or as a food for consumption.
Yeah. So I would say kind of in summary, we've been really, really honored with how kind of successful our Indiegogo campaign has been so far. So that was really exciting to us because we think this is something that's a really valuable tool for others, and getting kind of the feedback that people feel that it's a valuable tool for them has been really exciting. And just kind of thinking about, we really recommend Sundots as kind of a daily kind of supplement. And in order to kind of give you that background base kind of helping hand in thinking about the sun. And we also kind of hope that will help also be a little bit of a reminder, like if I'm taking my Sundot in the morning, maybe I should also remember to put my sunscreen on, and help kind of boost awareness in general about, about sun protection and its importance. So we really hope that people will join us on this journey and try them and bring that like tool into their sun protection toolkit. And to kind of answer your question about how has this been used before and being something endemic to Central and South America, in a lot of folk medicine and reports of sort of the use of this fern have dated back to like late 17, early 1800s. So there's been like really sort of, well-documented use of this. And it was used mainly for inflammatory conditions in folk medicine.
Topically?
No, orally.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it was prepared traditionally as a tea preparation in traditional medicine. And then I think that just kind of speaks to, the roles that antioxidants play in health. And it's been kind of studied for a lot of, potentially inflammatory skin disorders. There's been kind of clinical studies that are starting to look at its role there. But yes.
Now I'm even more excited just because almost everything you read about like the demise of American health and the diseases of civilization, it's all rooted in inflammation, whether it's on the skin or in your gut. Even like inflammation of the brain is the beginning of Alzheimer's and brain diseases. So that's like could be a really cool side effect, to use a negative term for a positive thing. And then we got to talk a little bit about your stretch goal because I'm a little bit excited about this too. Right now, This is 14 days from the end of the Indiegogo campaign at the time of this recording, which I hope will be a wonderful resource for years and years to come. But right now, you already have 400% of your goal. Congratulations, by the way. That is so fantastic.
Thanks to everyone that's helped us get there.
It's so great to see. And if you meet your stretch goal, you'll incorporate vitamin D right in the sun dots, which is always like a 2-for-1 for any parent is so good. You don't want to be like, honey, here's your sun dot, here's your vitamin D, here's your probiotic, here's your, you know what I mean? It's like exhausting for families. So what is the stretch goal? What's the number?
Yeah, so we're trying to get to 100,000. And that will enable us to formulate these with vitamin D. And something that's been really important to us is we're using vegan vitamin D. Okay. So there's like many forms of vitamin D that are sort of sourced from animal products, which we heard that for a lot of, potential customers that's kind of difficult for them. And it's also the reason we chose to make this with pectin instead of gelatin in terms of the gummies, is so that it could be a vegan product. And so our vitamin D is actually sourced from what are called lichens. So they're like kind of like a fancy moss is the best way to describe them. From the UK is where our vitamin D is coming from. So we really hope to reach that 100K mark so we can incorporate the D into our sun dial.
Very cool. I really hope you do too. And I feel very optimistic for you that you can get that last, actually 19,000 is all you would need to reach the stretch goal. Like, again, I would just like shout it from the rooftops even louder. But I'm excited about your product. I'm excited about your philosophy on the sun, your philosophy on, protection from toxins, and also, especially here at Kitchen Stewardship, we talk a lot about baby steps and giving ourselves grace when we are not perfect people. And so I love that that's part of your philosophy too. Like we say, do it every day so that you'll do it most days. And we get that. Like that's just, it's such a good, honest perspective. And I really appreciate that. But thank you so much, Dr. Javorsky, for being here and the great information you shared. And I'm just excited to continue seeing where you can go with this product.
Great. And thank you so much for having me. It's been really an honor to sort of chat with you and chat with your audience about sun, because it's something we're super passionate about. So we really appreciate the time.
Yep, we're totally science geeks on this one together. And this will probably not be the last time we hear from you. But yeah, thank you again. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much, guys.